topics at CFA Level 1. This year, quantitative topics cover 12% of the exam, which means you should expect to see somewhere around 29 questions related to quantitative techniques and quantitative related topics. Some of this material, however, is covered in other sections and other portions of the video series. For instance, net present value is covered in corporate finance, and internal rate of return is covered in the corporate finance section. So I'll be hitting the key concepts specific to quant. So with that in mind, and without further delay, let's go ahead and get rolling here on quantitative methods at Level 1. Right. First particular concept that we need to discuss and talk about is this whole concept of an interest rate. And we're going to be using interest rates to do time value of money types of adjustments of bringing dollars that are calculated in today's terms to the future and dollars that are calculated in the future terms into today. So what we'd like to be able to do is to formulate how we might be able to describe interest rate and explain interest rate as a sum of the real risk-free rate, expected inflation, and premiums associated with other types of risks. And if you think about it, interest rates, just like any other particular type of economic concept out there in the marketplaces, are determined by supply and demand factors. If you think about it, interest rates can be composed of a real risk-free rate plus a set of premiums that are required to compensate the suppliers of capital. You have the demanders of capital who need to borrow money, suppliers of capital who have that money available to be lent, and they need to be compensated for certain types of risks. And we need to be able to get an indication that the basic relationship is nothing other than the learning outcome statement asks you, and it's very important that you remember this relationship: real risk-free rate plus an inflation premium plus a default risk premium plus a liquidity premium plus a maturity premium. And this would be the relationship, this would be the basic structure of how interest rates would be determined in the marketplace. Another way to think about interest rates and to be able to determine whenever we're talking about rates of return is to make sure that the numbers that we are discussing are in the same units. And mainly what we're talking about is the same units of time. And whenever we are talking about same units of time, annual numbers can be either in effective, or they can be in stated or nominal type of rates. And we need to be able to make the connection between an effective rate and a stated type rate. The effective rate is going to assume this concept of compounding, where we're going to be able to earn money on our money, where the nominal rate just assumes that particular component away. So there will be a basic relationship between this effective rate and this nominal or stated rate out there in the marketplace. So if we have a stated annual rate, or which is also determined a nominal rate, we would essentially calculate the effective annual rate as follows. The effective annual rate is going to be equivalent to 1 plus the periodic rate raised to the number of periods or times a year that the compounding takes place minus 1. And you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, where did this periodic rate come from? But that's nothing other than taking the stated rate and dividing it by the number of periods within the year. So you can see that what we're doing is we're adjusting the rate within the parentheses and then raising it to the power of the divisor that we've adjusted the rate within the parentheses. Simple example, straightforward. Let's suppose we have a stated annual rate of 12%. What's going to be the effective annual rate assuming quarterly compounding? Now, quarterly compounding means 4 times a year. So in the parentheses, in the formula, we would divide 12, which is in decimal terms, not in percentage terms. 12% would be 0.12. Divide that by 4, add it to 1, raise that sum to 4, because essentially we've reduced the periodic rate from the stated annual rate to get an overall effective compounding effect. Minus 1 would generate 12.55%. So you can see that there are slight difference between effective rates and stated or nominal rates. And whenever you're making comparisons, you need to do an apple-to-apples comparison. Just need to make sure that you are comparing either the effective rate or the nominal rate, whichever one it is. They need to be the same, because otherwise you're not going to be taking into account, or you may be double counting the concept of compounding. Now, whenever we're talking about these issues associated with interest rates, effective rate.